Welcome back to the sessions on research methodology and IPR. So, in the first module, we saw a lot of issues concerning research, how do we define the objectives, what is the significance of research, and what are the different types of research, how do you define a research process. And if you recollect, the first step in the research process is defining the research problem, and the second step is the literature review. So, in this module, we will be taking up two important sections of the research process. The first one being the literature review and the second part being the research design. So, with this premise, let us proceed with the lecture. So, first we will consider reviewing the literature. So, I will be taking you through what is the meaning of a literature review, how do you do a literature review, and is there some structured process by which you can do it, and finally, how would you write a review paper, maybe at the end of your research work. And I will try to show you a sample review paper written by one of my students and me, so that you get an idea of how to organize a review paper. Now, first of all, what is the role of literature review? Literature review is a very critical part of any research, because it tells you the cumulative efforts and endeavors of different researchers in your field. A rigorous synthesis of the available work already done, it is indispensable. You have to know it. It has many reasons, and first and foremost, common sense will tell you that you should not duplicate the work. So, unless you know what work has already been done, you will not know whether your work is a duplicate, and then after maybe 6 months or 8 months of work, you find that it is already present, right. So, not only for PhD scholars or postgraduate students who want to do some research, this literature review is important for any practitioner of any profession, and for academicians and for graduate students to find, evaluate and synthesize the contents of many empirical and conceptual papers. So, in the research process, this is the first step after you define your research problem. Now, what purpose does literature review serve? It gives you a comprehensive overview of the current state of knowledge in a particular field. It is very important. Sometimes what happens, there is some research, some knowledge which should have been assimilatized, and it gets lost. There is so much of science embedded in our Indian old Sanskrit textbooks, in books of Egyptian civilization, and this was knowledge existing thousands of years back, but somehow down the lane it has been lost. And maybe in the last 2 centuries, a lot of inventions of this, the credit of these inventions and discoveries have gone to some modern scientists, but they are there way back, originally it is there. So, the literature review will provide you a comprehensive overview of the current state of knowledge. And what does the review involve? So, how do you get the knowledge? How do you get a comprehensive overview? You have to search. You have to search through the literature, and you have to critically evaluate what is available in the literature. What do you mean by critically evaluate? You go through the main arguments of what the researchers have presented, what is the evidence they have presented, and what is the conclusions they have drawn, and whether you see some anomaly between their defined objective and their results, or do you see some discrepancy in the data they have provided. So, it is not just like reading a novel or a newspaper. Literature review is not like reading a newspaper, just go through, get the headlines and some gist of what is happening. No, it is way beyond that, because you have to critically evaluate. So, for that you have to thoroughly understand. You should understand what the authors are trying to say in the paper, and then it will help you to identify the gaps. After reading a paper, you may feel, hey, why did they do it like this? They could have done it in a better way. Or, oh, they have concluded this, but this conclusion can be extended into something. So, the meaning of a gap is what you feel something more can be done, could have been done, or can be done by you. And why do we say it is the first step of the research process? Because very often when we start the research, a narrowed down research problem may not be available with us. For example, I may know that I want to do something in forecasting of say the growth of solar power in India. I want to do some research on that, or I want to do a research on maybe the reduction of fertility rates in some communities. So, these are all broad. So, if I try to narrow it, then I can say a study about the relationship between the use of digital media and a reduction in the fertility rate, or a relation between the education of women and the number of children they have, or research into developing a forecasting model for solar power projection using machine learning techniques. So, you see that is narrower than just broadly saying I want to study why there is a low fertility rate or something like that. So, generally what happens is when we start the research, we are not very clear about the exact nature of our problem. We have some idea of the area and what we want to do. So, the role of the review is it will help you to narrow down your research problem and say, hey, this is exactly what I want to do, because this is a gap in the area. This is a gap in the area. For example, if you take that fertility, I have read a lot of research into why education to women makes them have lesser children. Cost of living, there is a lot of research on how the cost of living affects the number of children people have, and then exposure to so many things like travel, entertainment, etc. And people feel, no, if I have children it will be a drawback and I want to enjoy, they call it as enjoying life. So, these are all there. But then I found a very interesting paper very recently, and that paper said the effect of being a single child on fertility. So, it is not as simple as, because everybody keeps having only one child, after 3-4 generations the population shrinks. It is not that angle at all. The angle is very interesting. A lot of people who are single children, they do not want to have children because they feel, okay, my spouse is also going to be a single child, and when we both grow, we will have 4 old people to take care of, 2 parents of each of us. So, that will be a huge drain on our energy. So, we do not want to get married, we do not want to have children. This was an entirely new aspect to why people are not having children. I was really surprised by what that researcher had done. So, this is what is important in the literature review. You have to critically evaluate the contents of whatever literature you are doing, and you have to identify the gaps. Hey, this angle has not been studied, this model has not been studied, this kind of an experiment has not been done, this particular diaspora of people have not been investigated, right. So, like this you get a lot of ideas. And a literature review, some definitions have been given. It is a systematic method, you can't do randomly. I take one paper, read it, I take one blog and read it, I look at some video, and then you will be in a big confusion. So, some systematic way you have, we will see what it is. So, some structure I should have, the way I conduct my review, It is a systematic method for identifying, evaluating and interpreting the work produced by other researchers, scholars and practitioners. This was a definition given by Fink. Okay. And without it, you will not acquire an understanding of your topic, of what has already been done, how it has been already researched and what the key issues are. This was Hart. Okay. So, we will again just see a few things about literature review to understand better. A literature review discusses published information in a particular subject area and sometimes information in a particular subject area within a certain time period. So, supposing you have a review paper or you want to review, the process of reviewing, what will it involve? So, you have to discuss the published information. So, if you write a paper, you discuss, otherwise you evaluate. When you are doing a review, you evaluate on a particular subject area and within that subject area on a particular topic, and you may just want a certain time period. For example, something technology related, you may not be interested because technology is so fast changing. So, I want in the last 10 years. Or supposing you are doing something on on mobile, the usage of mobile, you want to conduct some research on some aspect of behavior, then only you will be interested in only the last 10 years, because before that mobiles were rare, they were too expensive, everybody did not have it. So, you can also crunch the time frame. That will depend on what is the kind of research you want to do. Next, a literature review can be just a simple summary of the sources, just briefly, very briefly, or it can have an organized pattern and combines both summary and synthesis. So, what is the difference between a summary and synthesis? A summary is simply a recap of the important information of the source. So, these authors concluded, that is a summary. But a synthesis is a reorganization or a reshuffling of that information. You reorganize and you take up different papers, organize them with a structure, and you can reshuffle. It is not necessary that research which comes out later in a later period is better than an earlier research. So, some of your objectivity and subjectivity will come in the literature review. In the context of a research paper or thesis, the literature review is a critical synthesis of previous research. The evaluation of the literature leads logically to the research question. So, whenever we talk of literature review, you just see what all it is. The first is in your thesis or in your project. In the first chapter itself, what would you be saying? You will be giving introduction to your topic, and then the second section will be the main objectives, okay, or the second section logically should be the literature review. right? Because your objectives also will not be very clearly defined, because remember, before you do the literature review, your exact research problem may not be defined. So, after giving a brief introduction, you write the literature review. So, all the papers you have reviewed, and then you will talk about the gaps in the literature, right, and from the gap what is the motivation you got, and then from the motivation you define your objectives. So, this is the normal logical sequence of the first chapter, either in your thesis for research scholars or in your project work for postgraduate students, right. So, this is the first place where you have literature review. Second, supposing you are writing a research paper, you have some results, you want to publish a paper. So, in every paper, so depends on the journal. So, some journals insist on having a separate section of literature review, and some papers, some journals do not define. So, if it is defined as a separate section, you have to write it in that section. Otherwise, generally in the introduction we write very briefly the literature review also, because in papers the number of words, the number of pages are limited, right. So, I do not write a very elaborate. So, I will just say, I will say forecasting of solar power is important for the government, for the consumers, for the manufacturers, and for all the auxiliary businesses, right. So, different forecasting methods have been conducted, and then I give a brief review, right. I write a brief literature review of what forecasting methods are existing. So, Umar Rao and Prema et al. Have presented a time decomposition method for forecast evaluation, and then you give the reference, so on and so forth, right. And then you can say, in this paper we present a new method using the decoupling and decomposition of the data series in time. So, when the people read that introduction, they get an idea about what is the area in which you are going to work, and what is the brief review, and what is the new thing you are going to do. So, this is the second place where your literature review comes into picture. And the third is, I want to write a review paper. So, a review of forecast models for solar power. It is a paper by itself, I am publishing a paper. So, then what I have to do? Then I have to refer a lot more papers, because it is a paper on the existing methods. Okay. So, whatever we say, some of it may be relevant to one of the things you are doing, whether it is a literature review section in your thesis, or whether it is a literature review section in your research paper, or whether it is a paper you want to write on the review you are doing on your particular topic. Clear? So, based on the context, you see, I am going to give you a lot of information on literature review. Based on the context, you see where you want to place what I am going to tell, what I am going to discuss. Okay. Now, what are the benefits of literature review? I think by now you would easily know what are the benefits, right. So, the first benefit is you identify the gap. What more has to be done in the area? So, this is one of the key functions of the literature review. In fact, a lot of my students in undergraduate level, you know, I just give them some papers which I think will be, and they read it and they get an idea. They do not even know, and sometimes they are not even very sure of which area they want to work on. They say, ma'am, we are interested in power quality, we want to do something in statistics, and somebody will say we want to do something in signal processing. So, they are not very clear because they like so many things. So, then I give them some papers in each of these areas and say, you see what interests you, and then when they read, they will say, they get an idea, right. So, reading about something can give you a lot of ideas. So, one of the key functions of the literature review is to identify the gaps in the current state of knowledge. So, your review should be up to date. If it is 20th 2025, you should look at all literature up to 19th January 2025. Why? Because some idea you are thinking of publishing may have been published yesterday. Clear? So, it is very, very important up to the current time. So, by reviewing the literature, the researcher can identify areas where there is a lack of research or where the findings are inconsistent. What do you mean by that? Two researchers may have worked on a particular problem, but may have come up with different conclusions. So, there is no consistency. So, that will give you an idea, hey, what is this? Why are these two so different? Is it because the data they have used is different? So, that means you can't generalize the conclusions, or is it because their methodology is different? So, this will also give you an idea of what to work on. So, the information you get, you can use it to guide you in your research project, and it will also, as I told you, help you to narrow down and focus your research problem into a particular area of study. And you can also place your work in context to work which has already been done. And then you will realize whether your work is going to be meaningful or not. Is it, I mean, so much of work has been done, is what I am going to be, what I am going to do, would it even fit into this? Would it be meaningful? Would it be an extension of what people have done, and would it contribute to knowledge in the field? So, so many things you can identify, the gaps in so many areas. So, this is one of the first benefits of literature review. The second is the methodology. Sometimes what happens, we are not, see, we know broadly the processes, the research steps, define the problem, do the literature review, and then create the hypothesis, sample, data collection, data analysis, all these we know. So, now if it is sampling, what techniques do I use, what do I do? So, that all comes in the methodology, method and techniques. So, in the first module we saw what is the meaning of methodology, what is the meaning of the method and the technique. So, you may not be aware of so many things, right. So, a literature review, going through work which has already been done, will give you and guide you in the methodology and data analysis for your research project. It can act as a guide. Hey, these people have used this instrument in the experiment, so possibly I can also do it. And now this is an instrument I have not used before. So, if I am going to use it, then I must learn something about it. So, then you can go back, look into the instrument specifications and see whether it is going to be useful, right. Or this is a kind of survey they have done. This is the population they have chosen for this survey. So, maybe even I can do it. So, this idea about the method, methodology, etc., this idea you can gain by doing the literature review. So, it provides the foundation for your research design. In the next part of this module, we will see what is the research design, but the name itself tells you, you have to design how you are going to do the research. So, it will help you to ensure that the methodology is appropriate and relevant to the question, to your question. So, you may be thinking of collecting data, say from 100 people. For some problem you want to, for your research problem, something broad idea you have, and in your mind you feel that you have to collect data from 100 people. Now, you go through the literature and you see that for similar problems, people have collected data from 10,000 people, somebody has done from 5,000, and somebody has done from 8,000. And then you get an idea, hey, which means that just 100 people, if I take the data, it will not be sufficient. So, these people have already done work, or somebody might have even mentioned in the literature, we started sampling with 100 people, and then we went on to 500,000, and we found that larger the number of people taken for the study, better are the results. So, then you immediately know, no, this 100 number is not enough, I have to go for a larger number. You get it? So, a lot of these ideas you get by doing the reviews. And another very important thing is you can know what is going to lead to success and what is going to lead to a failure, because a truthful researcher normally will present the challenges and the failures also in the paper. Okay. For example, you can say this forecast model. So, the forecast model gave very good results with an error of 2% for the prediction in summer season. However, during winter season, the error rate with this model was up to 10%. Now, is this correct or wrong? I mean, is there some problem with the model? No. Then the author or the writer of the paper would have given some explanation. This could be because in winter, the changes in the weather are more, because sometimes it rains, sometimes the temperature falls below 0 and so on, and so we are not able to get a smooth data. Clear? So, all these things you will know what challenges to expect, what kind of failures to expect, how you can overcome that, and this is provided the person who is giving you the information is truthful. Next, dissemination of research findings. So, if you want to publish your result, that is the meaning of dissemination. Dissemination means spread. It should be original. You remember the first definition we gave of research is it should be original, something new, a new idea, a new product, a new process, a new method, a new material, okay, a new study, a new hypothesis, a new conclusion, something new. So, if you want to publish it, you must demonstrate that your research is original and it is going to add to the current knowledge in the particular field. So, once you have your literature review thorough, then you will know whether the work you are going to do or you are planning to do has already been done or you can contribute something new. So, very, very important. So, the literature review also allows the researchers to put their work in the correct context, in the broader context of the field, and to provide a clear and concise overview of the research to the audience. Audience means other researchers or other people who are going to read your work. And very important, the review will prevent you from duplicating. This is what I told you, since research has to be new, you cannot, you should not do something which has already been done. So, you prevent duplication of the results and work which has already been done. So, you can see, I am sure by now you have seen the significance of literature review. Now, how do you start conducting a review? How do you start conducting the review? Today the problem is the availability of information. It is humongous, huge, right, mainly because of the digital media. Earlier we only had journals, magazines, some published material, books, etc. to rely on, right. So, very rarely we found some letters or blogs or something. We did not even have access to those private thoughts of a researcher. Whereas today, any search engine, any topic you throw to it will throw you some 1 lakh, 2 lakh results in the area. So, you will be lost, in the ocean of literature. Sometimes I call it as the problem of plenty, too much. We have too much of everything today in the modern world. So, let us see whether in this sea or ocean of literature available, I can pick up something meaningful for my work. Supposing Google throws you 10,000 papers, which paper are you going to read? It will be virtually impossible for you to read 10,000 papers. Okay. So, what do we do? So, firstly is you define the research question. What exactly you want to do. So, before you define this, maybe you have to do some exploratory work. You remember in the first module we saw exploratory research means going through, exploring, right. So, once you explore, just read a few papers, arbitrarily you pick up and read, or the best is if you can get a book, because books have a lot of information, some groundwork. So, whatever you want, whatever you want to rely on. So, you do some exploratory research to get a sense of the scope. What is the scope of your work, right? And then try to get an idea whether you need to broaden your focus or narrow the focus. Sometimes you may be too narrow and you may have to slightly broaden it. I have seen that with some of my students. And sometimes it is too broad and you may have to narrow it. Next, identify databases that provide the most relevant sources. So, in searching only, you can search for databases, authentic databases. For example, if you want some content for some social science, then there may be some websites which is having. So, if you want some data on Alzheimer patients, there might be some website which is having. So, make sure it is authentic and you do not violate any privacy or confidentiality of the database. So, if you want some weather data, you have the meteorological website and so on. And identify relevant terms. First, be familiar with the glossary. There are a lot of things. So, if you want to work with forecasting, then you have to know some jargon, error, statistical mean, variance, standard deviation, MAPE, random errors, noise, all those things. And then you can finalize your research question. The second step is determine inclusion and exclusion criteria. So, think about, say supposing you are collecting data from people. So, what is the meaning of inclusion and exclusion? Do you want to collect data only from women? That is inclusion. I do not want any data from men, exclusion. Do I want the population to be from India, or do I want a global population, or it could be anything? So, you decide on the relevant dates, on the geographies, on the methods and conflicting points of view. For example, studies pertaining to Indian behavior may not be valid to some Caucasian population, or maybe Chinese population, or the Russian population, because every country has its own social, cultural, political, linguistic diversity. So, when you choose the papers also, you see what you want to do. This is especially true in social sciences. Whereas in engineering and technology, there won't be much of a difference, because everywhere maths is the same, chemistry, physics, everything is the same, right. But acceptable human behavior may be different across different cultures. Clear? So, you see properly what you want to collect, from which year you want to collect, from which area you want to collect. So, that will depend on your field of research. As I said, engineering, technology, pure science, they are the same globally. Ohm's law is going to be Ohm's law at every corner of the world, it is not going to change. Power quality is power quality all across the world. Clear? Whereas, what is an appropriate way of dressing is very different in India, it could be from Europe or US or some African country, right, and the way you address. So, here we do a namaste, somebody does a bowing, and somebody says a hi, somebody gives a hug. So, where human beings are involved, you have to be more careful about the culture from where you want to take the information, about the geographical area and so on. So, we will continue with these steps in the next video. Thank you.